And my dudes, we are back here on the YouTube channel. You guys know I'm getting back to doing some art tutorials here. And so one of the things I've been getting back to doing is these artist workout videos. I've created a whole playlist of videos that'll walk you through real-time challenges you should be doing every day. Last week, I put out a Speederbike workout, and that's basically 2-point perspective. And this is the fundamentals of how I design ships and vehicles and props and anything that you might need for concept art for video games, which is my profession. That's what I do. It's what I've done for 20 some years. Okay, this week I'm going nuts. I took that design, and instead of just making it a 15-minute thing, I just went nuts. I wanted to color it. I wanted to like skew out the proportions. I wanted to go all styly with it. I'm going to explain how I went from this to this. I'm going to include some nifty little digital artist tricks along the way so that you can maybe absorb some of those as well. So hope this helps you. And yeah, feel free to draw along with me on this one. I'd love to see your designs. Don't forget to tag me over on X or wherever you are and show me your designs or join my Discord. Okay, let's dig into the Speederbike concept art rendering phase. So this is obviously assuming you've watched the previous video where I showed you how to draw ships in perspective like this. The first thing I do is I want to bow it out. I want to really use some nice dynamics, curvature to things. And so to do that, this gets it that little bit of Jack and Daxter feel. I use the liquefy tool, which you guys have seen me use. I talk about this extensively in many of my videos. And I decided that I wanted to get a little less blocky with it. And that means bowing out like this bumper, this front bumper pad. And it's not really a pad, it's like a big metal plate. And I wanted the whole ship to feel more and more like a hammer. The story implication being, of course, that this Speederbike thing can blast through barricades or squads of enemies or, you know, bandits or whatever. This could be the kind of speeder it's not for transporting goods. Otherwise, I'd have a big cargo hold on the back. And by the way, if you are a part of my Discord, this is the monthly challenge, is to design a speeder. And that means thinking a lot about the story and like, who's the pilot of this thing and what is their job? What is their function? If they're a bounty hunter, they're going to have a spot to, like, you know, transport their bounty, you know, a person, possibly like a cage on the back or something, you know. In this case, you know, I'm thinking of a person who probably lives on a planet whereby there is a lot of hostile opposition. You know, they're going to have to slam through barricades. There's definitely going to be a little bit of like shrapnel strapped to the side of this thing. There's definitely going to be, you know, times where this person that's using this is going to need to drive this thing at night. And so I wanted to have, you know, big headlights on the front of this thing. And so all those things kind of get worked out in this, you know, still in the design stage. You don't really add color with most concept art. You never really add color until you have sort of locked in a design, unless, of course, you know, you've already got an approved design and then you're doing more rendering on it. There's a lot of misconceptions. I want to make a video about all the misconceptions about concept art. Most people don't realize how many iterations you have to do and how much storytelling you have to do. But the design itself still has to look good. It still has to have like competent line work. It still has to have like a good construction to it, reasonable, believable construction. You know, while I'm in this phase, I'm starting to think about things like, you know, is the shape of the dashboard, for instance, consistent with the kind of shapes and curves that we're seeing and the type of construction that we're seeing throughout the whole design? You don't want to have something where you've got like big circular windows and then big blocky square shapes throughout the whole design. Like if you're using a certain curve for the hood of this thing, you should use that same certain curve throughout most of the design so that it feels consistent. You know, you want it to look like it's manufactured by the same corporation or the same builder, the same manufacturer. In this case, I also thought, well, this is probably like a used universe. You know, I'm thinking a lot about the old Star Wars type of stuff from the original trilogy in the 70s and 80s, where it seemed as though there was a lot of stuff that was built like in the previous generation, and then the current generation got a hold of those parts and then they strapped them together to get it to do what they needed it to do, so to speak. And that was very prevalent in the original trilogy, where they called it a worn universe. And so it was like stuff was old, you know, things were broken down, things were like parts were strapped onto existing models, other models of things and rebuilt. And so in this case, with this particular speeder, I wanted something that looked sleek and like fast, but I also wanted something that looked like maybe there were bandits that had strapped on, metal scraps onto different parts of it so that they could create a more deadly type of speeder bike that they could blast into people and just obliterate. So yeah, this isn't like a speeder for royalty. This isn't a speeder for traveling in class. This isn't a speeder for transporting goods. This isn't a speeder for, military operations. This is like a scrappy scavenger's speeder. This is a kind of a speeder that you'd be traveling, across very dangerous hostile territory, and you might have to pull out a rifle and shoot from this thing. There are other subtleties here that you might notice, like there's a handlebar so it handles like a chopper, like a motorcycle. If I were able to rotate this, I am thinking about the parts that you don't see too. Like you would see pedals where they can actually it's kind of behind the front wing on the bottom there, but there would be pedals so they can control the acceleration. I wanted to kind of hot rod it out and have these exhaust pipes, sticking out of the hood of this thing. So it almost has a little bit of in a weird way, a little bit of like a Mad Max, like Star Wars, but in a Mad Max kind of a future where there's a apocalyptic overload of just machinery and motor parts, exhaust pipes sticking out of this thing, a little bit of rat fink, a little bit of that kind of just over the top kind of hot rod this thing out, man. I even considered putting flames on the side. Hey, why not? This is your speeder bike, and if you wanted to design it how you want to design it, add the personality and character that you want to just go nuts. Okay, to add color to this, I used my gradient map technique. This isn't a gradient overlay, it's a gradient map. So I make a selection and then I create a gradient map overlay, and then I have my number of gradients that I use. And of course you can get all that in my Photoshop cheat box. You guys know all these tricks, been around for about 10 years. And I decided on something less thought about going hot red, but then I realized, hey, orange is a nice cozy color. So I think I'm going to go with a little bit more of an orange color theme for this, a little bit of orange and a little bit of maybe tan colors, so it feels like it would just fit right into a nice hot deserty kind of a planet. If your values are correct, putting a gradient map over your artwork on a top layer there is just going to allow you to create color variation in a very quick and efficient way. This is like the fastest method for coloring your artwork. And then of course you'll have to unify it later with some color balance layers and other nifty tricks that you'll see me do here. But the cool thing about it is once you've got your different materials, each with their own gradient map, then you just start painting in the mask layer. The mask basically just says, okay, if this is that silver metal, then use that gradient map. And if this is the orange part of the ship, then use that orange gradient map. And then I'm painting that into the alpha channel. To really make it pop, I don't like white backgrounds, so I put in a gradient over, not a gradient map, but a gradient over the background of the whole freaking thing. So that's why we got this nice soft gradient in the background where it's a little darker at the top and a little lighter at the bottom. And you can really start to see how things are starting to pop out now. Now, keep in mind, when I'm painting something like this, I'm thinking of the whole thing in this, let's say 50% light. You don't want to have everything blooming out with saturation, because if everything's at about 50% darkness, then the rest of this phase is about popping out which materials are catching the most light. Now, these are a lot of metal surfaces, so I'm going in with a specular highlight, and I'm going in with a nice brighter highlight to pop out some of the reflective corners on these metals. And then of course, adjusting a little bit of the color balance layer to make sure that my colors are unified. That way the grays that I had have a little bit of that background blue in them as well. And just using an overall color balance layer over the whole damn thing gives it a little bit of a unifying color mix. But again, that's a very low opacity. And then the rest is on a layer on top of everything. It's just a normal painting layer. You can see I'm going to almost white hot specular because it's metal. Now, if this was not metal, then it wouldn't go to white hot specular. It would only be a slightly lighter color, but because we're dealing with a lot of metals here, and I want it to feel reflective. That's why I'm kind of hitting these corners of things with that. And keep in mind, you'll notice one thing that a lot of artists will sometimes get tripped up with is zooming in too fast. And I decided to just keep it zoomed out for most of the development. Especially if you're the kind of artist that's used to working on paper, you're probably going to dive into the details a little too fast. Really resist the urge to zoom in too early in the painting of a process of a painting. You want to, especially with concept art where you've got to work really fast, it's best to kind of keep it small. And this is something that I realized I kind of have a little bit of an advantage over a lot of concept artists because I will work on a laptop for most of the development of a painting. And then when I get to the final polish is when I start to work on a bigger screen. So by working on this smaller screen through most of a painting, I'm able to look at it almost like I'm squinting, almost like, especially as my eyes are getting worse. As you get older, your eyes will get worse. And so it's good if you're gestural, and it's good if you're thinking about the overall overarching design of things, and not zooming into the details too soon in the process, right? And so really reserve that time later to get into the nitty-gritty details. Like, I don't put speculars on the little knobs and handles until I'm in the last 5% of painting. Now, for the headlights, I made a selection, and on a new layer, I painted that in with a kind of a purple. And I thought purple would be a good color because it contrasts nicely with this kind of we have a little bit of an orangish red, and it's just going to make that pop out. And then I add a little bit of a layer glow to it. And so that's how I got that. Again, it's another one of my Photoshop cheats. If you're really curious about all of my Photoshop cheats, check out my Photoshop cheat box that I have over on my Gumroad channel. It'll save you just hours and hours of time. I've used Photoshop for 25 years now, maybe more. Oh my gosh. And so when you know your tool really well, you don't have to waste a lot of time doing things manually. That doesn't mean don't understand how the glow works or the light reflecting works. It just means that knowing the tools helps you to get it done faster. So I wanted the ship to feel like it's in this atmosphere a little bit more. So I create a new layer and then I add a airbrush to it. And I realize I'm going to have to just kind of colorize that and then erase out everything outside of the outline of the ship. So it's like a physical object in this space that's being affected by this light. And this is where layers become super valuable because you can create atmospherics. You can create you'll notice it lightens the black line art as it gets into the atmosphere. That's you get a little bit of this subscattering and a little bit of this diffusion from the light because it's in a space that has a fog, and it's very subtle, but all of these subtle things compound to create a little bit more believable lighting. And of course, by having that little fogginess on another layer, it allows me to colorize it. It allows me to cut things out a little bit more. So, I try to keep it minimal. So kind of in my mind, I'm sort of categorizing foggy stuff or glowy stuff onto their own categorical layers. And then anything that's sort of solid or color-based is on its own sort of category of layers. And so the speeder is starting to really feel like it's in its space now. And so I think it's finally to a point where I can zoom in and start to figure out a little bit more of the construction of things. I want to have some wires hanging out from underneath it. It's a little bit scrappy. This isn't a perfectly refined, smooth, oiled machine. This is something that's got dents in it. It's got bullet or blaster holes in it. It's got, some of the metal pieces aren't even aligned correctly. And you remember how I was saying, I don't really zoom in or work on a bigger monitor until I'm much further along in the design. And I would say that the total drawing time up to this point is maybe an hour and a half at most. Because, if you're doing these kind of concepts for a client, you're going to have to do iterations. You're going to have to do variations. And so you want to take it to just enough of a level of detail that you're selling the idea, but not so much that you've spent, a week on one iteration. Some concept artists are still to this day, they think that they got to spend, I got to spend 2 weeks on every painting. It's you're unemployable. If it takes you 2 weeks to do one iteration of a speeder bike, you're unemployable. I'm not trying to come down on you. It's just like figure out your tools to work faster so that you can make iterations. And I've had clients that literally had me working on iterations of one statue for 3 months. Yeah. And when I say like iterations for 3 months, I mean like I literally did 100 statues for League of Legends, for the towers. And then the final design, that goes to the 3D modeler, and then they've got a little bit of room for interpretation too. So this is the process of concept art. And especially as time goes on, it's like concept art is considered cheaper and cheaper, so you have to be able to create tons and tons and tons of variations and alterations and try to tell an interesting story with each one. And so you really have to enjoy this part of the process, just noodling around with your designs, and maybe you make a copy of the whole thing, and then you do a version B that has like bigger pipes or bigger wings or bigger engines, or maybe it's just a color variation, or maybe you amplify another element of the design to really make that part really prominent or pop out. And that's up to you. All this is also, I'm just telling you about the process of what I'm doing for my concept art when I got hired to do a contract job. I don't really do these sorts of things anymore. These days, I don't have to do as many iterations. This one was really just kind of like nostalgic. It took me back to kind of the way that I used to kind of do a lot of my contract concept art when I was doing a lot of this stuff for like Fortnite or whoever. I worked for so many companies. There's just a lot of iterative design like this, I never really got to work on a cool sci-fi project. That's something that I still hope that I can do, but it won't be in the same capacity because now I'm directing my own games. Oh, I always forget there's probably somebody who's never seen a video of mine before and they don't know about Twilight Monk. That's right. About 3 years ago, I left AAA game development so that I could create my own games. And our first game is Twilight Monk. It's a RPG Metroidvania. It's just released on Nintendo Switch and on Steam for PC. We're still doing updates for it right now. You can pick it up on any one of those 2 platforms right now. We're making big plans. This is just the beginning. We got all kinds of fun stuff planned for Twilight Monk. So go and check that out if you like my artwork and you'd like to learn how I do more of my artwork. You can pick up some of my tutorials. I have loads and loads of box sets of tutorials, and I'll teach you how I did art for Hearthstone, for Marvel Snap, for Fortnite, for Diablo 3, for League of Legends, for Overwatch. Oh my gosh, how many games have I made? And of course, you can always subscribe here on my YouTube channel, where I'm here every week with new videos teaching you how to draw and how to get a 6-pack. Okay, no, I don't know. I don't know how to get a 6-pack. I have theories, but I can teach you how to draw. Either way, please do subscribe and leave your comments below. I try to answer questions in videos. So we'll see you guys in the next one. All right, ciao.